Episode 3 of the Kedusha of Shabbat. We'll continue our discussion, understanding what we've said, the foundations that Shabbat, Chazal tell us, is Me'ein Olam Haba. We've seen how we create our Olam Haba by observing Shabbat. But the next question we must ask ourselves is, what is Olam Haba? What is the Olam Haba that we're referring to when Chazal said that Shabbat is Me'ein Olam Haba? So we're now going to explore a bit more about the future of the world. What is Olam Haba? The Ben Ish Chai, in explaining that Gemara in Berachot, he says that Olam Haba, which is being referred to in the Gemara, is not the Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls, but rather it is a stage of the world after Techiyat HaMeitim, after the resurrection of the dead. And that is a stage referred to as Olam Haba. The Ramban explains that when we die, anybody in this world, when he passes away, he goes to the Olam HaNeshamot. His soul goes to the world of the Neshamot. In this stage, the Ramban explains, our bodies are separated from our Neshamot, and someone who's worthy, his Neshama goes to what we refer to as Gan Eden. And if he's not worthy, unfortunately, his soul goes to what we call Gehenna. That's what happens when someone passes away. Says the Ramban, the next stage is Techiyat HaMeitim. In Techiyat HaMeitim, the body will reunite with the soul, and they will coexist now forever. There will be now a unification between the body and the soul, and they will last forever. This stage after Techiyat HaMeitim, the Ramban says, is referred to as Olam Haba. And this stage will last forever. It will perpetuate for eternity. After 6 days of creation, it says in the Torah, Asher bara la'asot, which Hashem created to make. The Ramban, in expressing the extra phrase, what does it mean, Asher bara la'asot, which Hashem made to make? He explains that the 6 days of creation corresponds to the 6,000 years of the world. Hashem made the world in 6 days, la'asot, to make the rest of the world. The reason why we have a world of 6,000 years was because Hashem made the world in 6 days. The 6 millenniums of the world, each corresponds to one of the 6 days of creation. Why is it a ratio of 1 to 1,000? As the Pasuk in Tehillim says, that in Hashem's world, in Hashem's perspective, 1 day is equivalent to 1,000 days. The Pasuk says, Ki elef shanim be'einecha, ki yom etmol, ki yavor v'ashmora balayla. We see a reference between 1 to 1,000. So Hashem created 1 day. Each day in Hashem's world is equivalent to 1,000. So Hashem created 6 days, so there's going to be 6 millenniums in this world. And what was the final day of creation? After the 6 days of creating the world, the final day of creation was Shabbat. What's going to come after the 6 millenniums, according to the Ramban? It will be Olam Haba, a world that will exist forever. This is a day of rest and tranquility, and this is what is Shabbat. Shabbat is like the Olam Haba, the last stage in the existence of this world, which will exist forever, which will be a state of pure tranquility and bliss. That is Shabbat, that is Olam Haba. That's how the two align beautifully. The Mishnah lists all the respective songs that they would sing in the Bet HaMikdash every day. That which we call the Shir Shel Yom. Every day, the Leviim would sing a different song corresponding to that day. And the Mishnah tells us what was the song that they sang on Shabbat. So they sang Tehillim, Tzadi Bet, Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, the song of praise to the day of Shabbat. But what is the day of Shabbat referring to? We think it's referring to our Shabbat. But the Mishnah says, no, it's referring to a day of Shabbat that is for eternity, for bliss. A day of eternity. And Rashi explains what's that day. Rashi says that the world will be destroyed for a span of 1,000 years. 1,000 years, a millennium of destruction. And that is like the day of Shabbat. because during these 1,000 years of destruction, no work will be done, and that's similar to Shabbat, when no work is going to be done. We need to unpack, what does Rashi mean? What is this 1,000 years of destruction? Where does this fit into the timeline of the world? What is its purpose? Why is Shabbat compared to these 1,000 years of destruction? The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Rav Katina teaches us, he says that the world will be 6,000 years, 6 millenniums, 6,000 years, like the Ramban just said. This is his source from Rav Katina in the Gemara. But then he says it will be followed by a millennium of destruction, 1,000 years of destruction. Some explain what he means is there'll be utter destruction, and some understand it's only partial destruction. But what this means is that this will be a stage of preparing the world for Olam Haba. It's destruction for the sake of reconstruction. There's going to be a new world order in Olam Haba. To get to that stage, the world needs to be reconstructed and have a 1,000-year period of destruction, and we'll get then to the ability to reconstruct the world, and the world can then enter Olam Haba. The Ramchal explains that man is imperfect. We all know that. We all know our imperfections. And because we can't reach perfection in this world, says the Ramchal, therefore, before we enter Olam Haba, our bodies have to perish. We have to die. That's why there is death, because we can't reach perfection in this world before we enter Olam Haba. And similarly, says the Ramban, the world also is corrupt. The world is imperfect. After the sin of Adam HaRishon, the world around us is an imperfect world. That's what we can see. So similarly, the world, in order for it to go into a stage of Olam Haba, it needs to go through a form of death, a form of destruction as well, so it can be recreated to reach a new state of perfection. And the Gemara says, during these 1,000 years of destruction, the tzaddikim, though, they will still exist. There'll be destruction all around them, but the righteous will exist. The Gemara says they will be flown on the wings of birds, and they won't be subject to the destruction. So what is the purpose of the tzaddikim during these 1,000 years? Is they're going to be given new strength. It's the idea of being raised on wings, is that they'll be given new strength to uplift them. They'll be given a new spiritual energy, the righteous, to prepare them to enter into Olam Haba. And at this stage, their bodies won't need any more food and drink. It'll be a state where they're uplifted from what's happening around them. They're given new strength, so then they can now enter into Olam Haba. So when the Mishnah says that on Shabbat they sang Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, and Rashi's teaching us it's referring to these 1,000 years of destruction, it's referring to this time when the righteous, they get their reward for all their efforts during the 6,000 years of the beginning of the world, the 6 millenniums. And now, as the Sehilim goes on to say, Shetulim Beveit Hashem, they're being planted, the righteous are being planted in the house of Hashem. They're now receiving their reward, and they're being entrenched and planted in the house of Hashem, and Hashem thereby is preparing them for Olam Haba. And what happens during this 1,000 years? The wicked are destroyed. Like we say in this Tehillim, we talk about the reward given to the righteous, and we also talk about the destruction given to the Rashaim. That's what now, as the world needs to reach its perfection, those who are wicked and not deserving, they need to be destroyed. And even though Rashi is saying that Shabbat in this Mishnah is referring to the 1,000 years, the day of Shabbat referred to in Tehillim really extends forever. And that's what the Mishnah concludes. The Mishnah says, it said, Yom Shabbat le'menucha le'chaya ha'olamim, for chaya olamim, for eternity. And this phrase has two interpretations. What does it mean? It's a day of rest for eternity. Le'chaya ha'olamim. Some explain it's a reference to Hashem. Hashem is the chaya olamim, the life source of eternity. Why? Because He gives creation their life source. So Hashem is a reference to chaya olamim. And some explain, no, it's going back on the actual day of Shabbat. That Shabbat is a day that brings rest for eternity. It's a day, Shabbat is a day that will usher in an eternity of tranquility. The Gra, interestingly, he explains that what does the Tehillim mean? Mizmor, Shir, Liyom HaShabbat. There's seemingly a repetitive phrase in the beginning. Mizmor is a song, and Shir is also a song. Why does it have the double expression? So the Vilna Gaon says, this complements how we're explaining it. He says it's referring to two separate periods of time. It's first referring to the 7th millennium, which will be at the 1,000 years of destruction. That's the time of menucha, because there's not going to be any work. And Chaya Ha'olamim, the end of the Mishnah, says the Vilna Gaon, is referring to all the time after the 7th millennium, when that will be a pure state of Tchiyat HaMeitim and Olam Haba. So our Shabbat is just a mere microcosm of that millennium. And it's showing us what world will be ushered in. Our Shabbat is disconnected from the physical work, just like those trees, just like those years. And when we have freedom from work, we don't have to work, what can we do? We can grow in our spirituality. But our Shabbat is just a fleeting moment. It comes and it goes. After 25 hours, it's up. And it's a single day relative to the future stage which will exist forever. And therefore the Shabbat in the Mishnah, which is reference for a Shabbat forever, is called L'chaya Olamim, is for eternity. But our Shabbat, what is it called? Yom Shekula Shabbat. It's a day which is entirely of Shabbat. Really, Shabbat should be forever. But our day is a Yom, it's a singular day, Shekula Shabbat, which has the ability to usher in a time period of eternity. And this is the final stage when we're saying Shabbat represents Olam Haba. It's this later stage. Yom Tov, we don't have any source what it is. Is Yom Tov Me'ein Olam Haba, or is it not Me'ein Olam Haba? We don't find any sources in Chazal what Yom Tov is like. Till now we've all the time been speaking about Shabbat. What is Yom Tov like? What does Yom Tov represent? The Maharal has a beautiful chidush, a beautiful noveli, and he says that Yom Tov represents the days of Mashiach. In the timeline of the Ramban that we're working with, the days of Mashiach are the days that precede Olam Haba. And it's a stage in this world that before the world reaches its perfection of Olam Haba, we'll have a time period in this world called Yemei HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach. Yom Tov are festive days, the days of Simcha. They're different to weekdays, the days of also bliss. Yet we can cook during the days of Yom Tov. Ochel Nefesh is permitted on Yom Tov. Why? Because we still have to take care of our physical bodies on Yom Tov. With the Maharal's idea, it fits perfectly, and that's why it parallels the day of Mashiach. Because during the days of Mashiach, there will be festive days, there will be days of happiness, but our bodies will still be in the physical state they are now. And therefore we will have to tend and take care of our bodies. Therefore, the days of Yom Tov, which represents the days of Mashiach, we also have to take care of our bodies, and we have a permission to cook. A unique mitzvah to Yom Tov is the mitzvah of Eruv Tavshilin. When Yom Tov precedes Shabbat, in order to cook for Shabbat on Yom Tov, so you need to set up an Eruv, which is a cooked dish, and you prepare it before the Yom Tov starts. So only if you prepare a meal before Yom Tov, then on Yom Tov you can prepare for Shabbat. So this mitzvah has 3 stages. The first stage is the preparing on the weekday. The second stage is the cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbat. And the third stage of this mitzvah is the actual pleasure, the eating on Shabbat of what you cooked the day before on Yom Tov. With the addition of the Maharal, we see this exactly resembles the 3 stages of this world in the correct order. The weekday is in the world that we are in now. This is a day when we have to cook. This is a time period when we have to cook. Then there's the days of Mashiach. That's before the world reaches perfection. That's Yom Tov. That's the second stage in the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin. And the third stage in the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin is Shabbat, when we can benefit. That is the stage of Olam Haba. And Chazal tell us, only if you work before Shabbat can you benefit on Shabbat. Only if you've exerted yourself before Shabbat will you then have what to benefit and eat on Shabbat. Once we're in Olam Haba and we see the revelation of Hashem, it'll be clear who is Hashem, then it's too late to add to your tally of reward. It's too late. You see Hashem, obviously you don't have any more free choice. The Maharal adds that not only is it too late in Olam Haba to do more mitzvot to add to your tally, but the Maharal says even during the days of Mashiach, it's too late to do mitzvot to add to your tally. The Maharal says there's an exception. If the mitzvah that you do during the days of Mashiach, you started it sooner, you began doing that mitzvah before the days of Mashiach, so then on those mitzvot, you can get the reward. What's the difference? What's the distinction when I started the mitzvah or not? If you began the mitzvah only during the days of Mashiach, so why are you performing the mitzvah? Because now the times are easy, Mashiach is here, there is less oppression from the non-Jews during the days of Mashiach, so it's easier to do mitzvot. And you know imminently, Olam Haba is going to arrive, it's around the corner. So there's no proof that you're doing the mitzvah lishma, for the sake, merely just for the sake of honoring Hashem. You have ulterior motives why you're doing the mitzvah, because it's so apparent that you have to do it and you're awaiting Olam Haba. So the Maharal says, only a mitzvah that's done lishma, for the ultimate purpose, without any ulterior motives, only on such a mitzvah do you get reward for. Only such mitzvot can add to your tally on Olam Haba. So if I only begin doing the mitzvah now in Yimei HaMashiach, there's no proof that I'm doing it lishma. So then it's too late to try and add to your tally of Olam Haba. If you want a mitzvah to be added to your tally, if you began it before Yimei HaMashiach, when it was difficult, when there was anti-Semitism, when there was financial constraints, when it didn't look like Olam Haba was imminently around the corner, but still you observe the mitzvot, so that's proof you did the mitzvot lishma. So even if you continue doing that mitzvah during Yimei HaMashiach, you can get reward for it in Olam Haba. This is the message of Eruv Tafshilin. Shabbat is Olam Haba. And to have maximum reward in Olam Haba, what do you have to do? You have to start to work. When do you work? You can't start to begin to work during Yemei HaMashiach. It will be too late then. You can't start to prepare for Shabbat food on Yom Tov if Yom Tov is on Friday. It's too late. But if you started preparing the food already before Yom Tov, on Wednesday or Thursday before, on the weekday, so then you can continue to prepare. So if we want to make our Olam Haba, now, before the days of Yom Tov, of Yemei HaMashiach come, we need to work. And that's how we create Olam Haba. We work in this world, then Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll have the days of Mashiach akin to the days of Yom Tov, and finally we'll bring then the Shabbat, which will be Yom Shekula Shabbat, an eternity of Shabbat, which will be really the Olam Haba, the final stage after the Yemei HaNeshamot, after Tchiyat HaMeitim, and that will be Yom Shekula Shabbat, Lemenucha, Lechaya Olamim.